opinion on the Parkersburg sanitation petition Thursday. Our Thomas Chase joins us now in the studio with what was said. What can you tell us, Thomas?
Thanks, Yogan. Yes, City Attorney Blaine Myers wrote an opinion Thursday to Parkersburg City Clerk Connie Schaefer regarding the sanitation petition submission last week. In the opinion, Myers writes that he believes that the verification process of the petition be continued to determine whether the petition for referendum contains the required number of signatures. However, Myers would then write that he does not believe that action can be taken on the petition due to the city charter, as the waste management contract falls under the city budget. Myers said that Section 8.101 of the city charter does not allow for referendums against the budget of the city, and that the referendum falls under the budget of the city in the appropriation of city money. We have more of the written opinion on our website, WTAP.com, and we'll continue to update you as we learn more about the petition. Back to you, Logan.
Thomas Chase reporting live in the studio. Thomas, thank you. As you spring forward this